In the room, Jenny sat in a chair while Julian dried her hair with a hairdryer. As Julian's slender fingers touched her damp hair, Jenny felt incredibly relaxed and unconsciously closed her eyes. Raka would never do something like this for her in 1,000 years. After ensuring Jenny's hair was completely dry, Julian turned off the hairdryer. "All done," he said. Jenny opened her eyes and turned to Julian. "Thank you." Julian smiled softly and pulled her into his embrace. "Do you think a simple thank you is enough? I want you to do something for me next time." Jenny felt her cheeks flush. "Leave me alone, Julian, you shameless man." She playfully swatted his chest with her hand. Julian chuckled softly. "Shameless? I just want you to dry my hair next time. How can that be considered an outrageous request? But if you think so, I'll gladly accept it." Jenny covered her face in embarrassment, feeling tricked by Julian once again. He loved to tease her because every time he did, Jenny looked incredibly sweet. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A servant entered and bowed. "Young master, dinner is ready." Julian nodded and took Jenny's hand, leading her to the dining room. He pulled out a chair for Jenny. "Please, have a seat." Captivated by his kindness, Jenny sat down quietly. Julian sat beside her and signaled for the servants to serve dinner. As the servants placed the dishes on the table, Julian began to fill Jenny's plate, saying, "You need to eat more, you're too skinny." I don't want people saying that Julian doesn't feed his wife well. Jenny rolled her eyes. "I'm not that skinny." Julian gave her a meaningful smile and insisted, "Eat up." While they enjoyed their dinner, Jenny suddenly put down her chopsticks and looked at Julian. "I haven't told anyone about my whereabouts. My father must be looking for me." Julian gazed at her calmly. "Don't worry about that. I've already informed your father through someone. But he doesn't know about our marriage. That's something you'll have to tell him yourself." Jenny nodded, feeling anxious about how her father would react. Julian noticed the worry in her eyes and took her hand. "There's no need to be nervous. Everything will be all right." Jenny offered a weak smile and picked up her chopsticks again. However, before she could take a bite of chicken, Julian stopped her. "Wait a moment." He called over one of the servants and asked, "Is there bell pepper in this dish?" The servant nervously nodded. "Yes, sir." Julian narrowed his eyes and snapped, "Didn't I tell you that the young lady is allergic to bell peppers? I clearly requested that there be no bell peppers in this house. How could you be so careless?" Seeing the servant on the verge of tears, Jenny quickly intervened. "That's enough, Julian. You don't need to yell at them. They're human too, not robots. Mistakes can happen." She looked at the servant with a gentle smile. "Come in and don't think too much about it. Julian didn't mean to scare you." The servant felt immensely relieved to see Jenny's kindness, grateful for the chance to rectify the mistake. Jenny turned back to Julian. "How did you know I was allergic to bell peppers?" Julian replied calmly, "I have my ways. Besides, bell pepper allergies are quite common." Jenny knew Julian was lying but simply nodded. "Oh, I see." They continued their meal in silence until Julian finally broke the ice by asking, "What are your plans next? I mean, do you intend to stay at home or do something else? Even if you choose to stay at home, I won't mind." Jenny rubbed her head, frowning. "I'm confused about what to think. I've always dreamed of being a model, but it feels too late for that," she said, filled with worry. Julian noticed the disappointment in Jenny's eyes and felt the depth of her desire to be a model. Although the thought of Jenny performing in revealing outfits made him a bit anxious, he didn't want to stand in the way of her dreams. "It's never too late for anything," he said, gazing at Jenny. "You have time to think about it. Now that you're Julian's wife, you can do whatever you want." Jenny rolled her eyes and replied sarcastically, "You always say there's nothing you can't do. You're not God, you know?" Julian chuckled lightly. "True, I'm not God, but believe me, when I say I can do anything, I really mean it." In the bedroom, Jenny looked anxious. This was the first time she would share a bed with a man. Although she had been in a relationship with Raka for 3 years, they had only shared kisses. Julian noticed her nervousness and tried to comfort her. "What are you thinking? Let's just sleep. Don't worry, I can control myself. But if you feel like you can't control yourself, I won't mind if you take advantage of the situation." Jenny rolled her eyes and responded, "Ah, you shameless man." She then sat on the bed, covered herself with the blanket, and said, "Who says I can't control myself? My driver is way more attractive than you." With that, she fell asleep. Julian could only laugh as he turned off the lights before bed. He was the first to wake up, gazing at Jenny's peaceful face beside him. Gently, he brushed his fingers against her cheek and kissed her forehead, feeling endlessly grateful to have her by his side. As the sun began to fill the room with light, Jenny slowly opened her eyes and met Julian's gaze. "What are you looking at?" she asked, a shy smile spreading across her face. Julian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and replied softly, "Nothing." "Good morning, my wife." Jenny buried her face in the blanket, warmed by Julian's words. "Good morning," she whispered back. Julian got out of bed, saying, "It's still early, just sleep a little longer. I'll make breakfast." Just as Jenny was about to respond, they heard a commotion coming from downstairs. She quickly stood up and asked, "What's happening down there?" "Stay here and rest. I'll check it out," Julian replied before leaving the room. When he descended the stairs, Julian was taken aback to find his grandparents, parents, and younger brother gathered in the living room, surrounded by an array of gifts. He sighed, realizing that his family was celebrating something significant. "Grandpa, Grandma, what are you doing here?" he asked, struggling to contain his frustration. "You ungrateful little rascal, is this how you greet your elders?" shouted an elderly man in his 70s, Herman Bhaskara, Julian's grandfather and the founder of Bagatama. Julian's grandmother, Sarah Pratama, who, despite being in her late 60s, still looked vibrant and beautiful, tried to calm her husband. "Dear, please relax." Julian approached his grandparents respectfully, saying, "Grandpa, Grandma." He then turned to his parents, Dad, Mom. Julian's father, Andrian Bhaskara, who bore a striking resemblance to Julian, was the chairman of Bagatama. Beside him stood Julian's mother, Melissa, in her early 40s, with captivating gray eyes. Melissa patted her son's shoulder and said, "I'm so proud of you. You've proven that you are my son." Julian raised an eyebrow and asked, "Did you think I wasn't your son all this time?" Melissa huffed, "Of course I had my doubts. How could my cowardly son not dare to woo the girl he loves? Sometimes I wondered if you were switched at the hospital, even considered a DNA test." Daniel, Julian's younger brother, couldn't hold back his laughter. "Sorry, bro, but that's hilarious." Julian shot a sharp glare at his brother, about to speak, but his mother interjected, "Enough, you two. Don't tease my son like that. And you," she said to her husband, "never doubt that he's your son again. If necessary, I'll get a DNA test, and you'll be the one preparing the divorce papers." Thank you all. Have a nice day. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, so that the admin is more enthusiastic to provide entertainment for all of you. See you in the next video.